What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 375. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
Good to see you guys. It's been a couple weeks since we've gotten together. I spent last week in the beautiful town of Destin, Florida.
Oh, cool.
First time there, and I can't recommend it enough. It's a beautiful, beautiful beach
Really?
town.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd heard amazing things, and probably one of the nicest beaches, if not the nicest beach I've been to, especially in the United States, but even rivaling some of the Caribbean beaches I've been to. White sand, clear water. You can walk out like hundreds of feet and you're still like up to your waist. It was incredible. I have to send you guys some photos. It was great.
That sounds really cool.
So the cost of doing that though is that we didn't have a show last week, but thankfully this week we have a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to do John's pick for required viewing, which was 2010's Super by James Gunn, who we will then talk about, or you two will talk about, his capper for the Guardians trilogy, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is out today, the day this podcast releases. And then we'll round the show out with some random things that we've watched. And I've got a handful of them. I'm excited to mention some movies I've watched.
Okay.
Cool. I'm trying to keep myself busy and have something to add to this. And sadly, I was not able to see Guardians, but I can't wait. I didn't ask you guys intentionally what you thought because I wanted to hear it live on the pod, as they say. But before we get to that, John, take it away. Tell us about Super and again why you chose it.
Well, I mean, partially because I knew that it would line up with roughly. I didn't know it was going to line up. If we had done an episode last week, it wouldn't have lined up perfectly. But I thought it would be close enough to the new James Gunn movie. And in a weird way, this is the last movie he did before, and not in a weird way, this is just a fact. This is the last movie he did before becoming Marvel's guy. But in a weird way, you could say this is the movie that got him the Marvel gig. But I don't think it's just this. I think it's his screenwriting work and probably, Slither and different things. Right. But it's funny to say that this is the last of that early era James Gunn. This is the trauma era of James Gunn. And obviously, though, playing around with ideas that he would develop over these much more sort of sincere, we might say, attempts at superhero films later. So, yeah, I think that for me, when this movie came out, it was like at the height of me reading movie news and movie websites. And so I read about it and I knew it was coming and I knew James Gunn because I liked Slither and I knew that he was that guy. And I liked Rainn Wilson at that time. He was a character actor I had noticed, and I thought I was kind of waiting for him to break out into something. So I remember when I heard about this, it sounded like something I would like to watch. And then I don't know if it was just at the era where limited release meant that it took a couple months to come my way or something. I don't know what it was that made me miss this movie completely. But as a James Gunn fan, I always thought, oh, well, now I have all this other stuff to deal with. And, you just move on sometimes. And you sometimes I think you saw something and then you stop and realize that you haven't. So, I mean, when I realized that and it was lining up with the Guardians and we're doing this, on the show, I was just like, you know what, this is a perfect time for me to, because, that's one of the things we can use this feature for is whoever, you could have watched it yesterday, but I'm still going to require that we talk about it on the show because I haven't seen it at all yet. So I didn't know what your guys' relationship with this movie was before this at all. Had you seen it previously, Ronald?
I saw it. Yeah. I saw it around the time that it came out. And I was really high on it at the time. It was like pretty crazy that it felt like something that was outside of the fold of any superhero movie that I'd seen. And it had a unique voice and it was violent as shit. And I just was very enamored with the idea of it. And it's interesting watching it now versus, 2011, 2012, and how different my perspective is on the movie in general. But yeah, man, I'm very familiar with it, but it's been a while since I've seen it.
What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw it within, a year or so of it. I don't think I saw it theatrically, but definitely saw it around the time that it came out for, reasons like you had mentioned. I really liked Slither a lot. And, I had just kind of been aware of James Gunn and kind of what he was doing as a writer and a director, but like also like the Dawn of the Dead remake that he wrote and just like his name kind of always kept. Yeah, huge. Like just
like
popped
the
up.
Script in particular of that was huge.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I just like he was kind of always on the radar. And I just remember seeing it around the time of its release, and I really haven't touched it since then. I mean, you mentioned last episode, like kind of conflating it or kind of mixing it with like Kick-Ass, or at least the kind of like what it looks like on the surface. And I think a lot of people probably did the same thing, but yeah, I kind of always just like remembered it just because of Rainn Wilson and well, Elliot Page at this time. But
Yes.
you know, the cast was, you know, always stood out to me. I think even like Liv Tyler and
Kevin
but
Bacon,
Kevin
Nathan
Bacon, right? But yeah, I don't know. Like I kind of remember being pretty mixed on it when I saw it back then.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, rewatching it, I kind of feel the same. I mean, I feel like um in perspective, you know, especially having gotten more James Gunn movies, even when you consider like the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, you know, these are like bigger IP comic booky things. But really what he's gotten so great at is like, you know, the characters that he writes, and like, you know, the tone of his more recent movies have been way more dialed in, and like you kind of, you know what you're getting with his films now, even on the larger scale that he makes them. And I feel like this movie feels probably the weakest in terms of like how well written the characters are. Kind of feels like it kind of felt a little thinner to me, and even in this one, like the tonal shifts, which I'm curious to see what you guys say about Guardians 3, because I feel like that's what like a buzzword that I feel like people have been using in some of the reviews I've read. But I mean, in this movie, I just feel like the tone is all over the place. And you know, beyond how violent or graphic or any of those things are, that's not really what kind of stands out to me. I think it's more like watching it now, knowing the James Gunn that I know in 2023,
Right.
and comparing it to everything he's done since then. I feel like he's really kind of, again, dialed into like this like signature trademark kind of movie that is very reliable to me. And maybe this was a movie where he was a little mixed on that, or kind of deciding where he was going to lean towards one way or the other, because there's definitely like glimpses of that in this movie. But I don't know, just wasn't a really big fan of it. What did you think, John? I mean, you hadn't seen it, right? So what did you think of
I
it?
kind of agree with both of your kind of present day take of feeling like this is not the refined James Gunn. It made me think, if I went back and rewatched Slither, would it seem a little more like lumpy and just, I mean, again, not like bad, but just like you said, that tonal shifting. Because I mean, that's honestly, when you said tonal shifting, it's like so funny that I had like light tonal shifting in my mind when I was thinking about this movie, as far as
Right.
what he's doing, both as a filmmaker, he's trying this out, and he's like maybe doing something somewhat experimental, which is to like throw all these things into the blender. And now we have seen such a refined job of it. Honestly, some of the
Right.
best version of it that anybody's ever done, in my
Right.
opinion, of that sort of light tonal shifting within an action adventure movie. You know, the Guardians movies, the Peacemaker show. We've talked a lot about how that heart that you're talking about, caring about the characters, feeling like the jokes have teeth, feeling like the world has stakes. That's all stuff that he brings that I think is in this movie. And so I found myself thinking, kind of similar to what you said, Steve, but also thinking maybe I would agree with Ronald, if I had seen it in 2010 when it came out, would I have found it a little more refreshing? And I think I would have. And it's one of my notes. One of the biggest things I wrote on my pad when I was watching the movie, I didn't write much, but one of the things I wrote was, this movie is so 2010. It's just, it's like, you know how you don't think there's stuff fashion to an era, and then you see like someone point out like what people were wearing in 2005. And I think we all sort of feel like the 2000s don't really have distinctions yet, but I see people occasionally now making distinctions about the 2000s as like opposed to the 2010s in terms of music, in terms of fashion. And I feel like this is that perfect example of, this is like the old James Gunn. This is the James Gunn who made jokes about pedophilia on Twitter because he was being edgy, you know, and being shocking. And nowadays we just don't like, even James Gunn has said he doesn't like that style of comedy. We all sort of grew out of it. So this movie kind of captures him at a time where he's doing that trauma thing. I mean, I think I enjoyed aspects of it, and I will say I did enjoy the fact that it's a James Gunn movie that has all the little tropes of what he does. Even the opening animated sequence made me think, oh, he had the idea for the Peacemaker sequence, like, because there's like a coordinated dancing thing going on there, or choreographed dancing. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of fun to be had, and it was an enjoyable watch. But yeah, as far as like what the movie was, I think I kind of agree with you, Steve, in the sense that just the shifts don't necessarily work towards a cohesive whole. There are individual moments that work pretty well, and I think Rainn Wilson is clearly having fun doing exactly what the movie's calling for. And I think Elliot Page, honestly, I've never been that huge on Elliot Page, like any particular performance from them, but I enjoyed, there were aspects of this role that I thought were like, I found myself chuckling and sort of enjoying what that character was doing, because it was so clearly meant to be this too extreme version of what the movie's presenting, you know.
Yeah.
But when I say kick-ass too, it's like the hit girl thing. There really is such a line you can draw up, and that's like the down the middle, more successful version of this basic idea.
Yeah.
Even though this movie, as you said, Ronald, the violence, like the wrench, using a wrench is just horrifically violent, but there's a certain kind of comedy to how unnecessarily horrifically violent that is. And I did find myself enjoying, again, the slight edgelord aspect of that. Like, I'm, you know, just like, oh, I can feel what James Gunn was doing, what before he made movies for Marvel, before he made movies for DC, like what he was doing with the superhero tropes in this feel very, like I said, it's just a hangover from that trauma aesthetic, even more so than that, let's say Dawn of the Dead was, in the sense of that was a big script. Like that was a movie that a lot of people really enjoyed. So I don't know. I'm glad I watched it. And it was only 97 minutes long, and there were certain things that I thought were interesting. The things about it that like had me, like, I think Liv Tyler's role, for instance, is a weird role, because the movie goes on to make you realize that you're supposed to be sort of like there's some sincere something going on there. But at first, the way she's acting feels like she's just this really underwritten character, you know? And she still doesn't really have an ounce of agency in the whole movie, it doesn't seem.
Right.
And I just don't know. Again, there's certain things like that just, and also there's a part where Elliot Page goes into a tear. There's like one scene where she drops the F word as a slur for gay people. She uses the M word for little people. She makes some other reference in that same scene. I was like, man, they just hit the trifecta. And then later Kevin Bacon has to come out and pull a Tarantino and be a white guy saying the N word on screen. I don't know. Those little things felt unnecessary to me. Like, felt like, oof, this doesn't, it just hits different in 2023. And I'm not saying I have delicate little politically correct ears, but it felt like, oh, this is somebody feeling their oats.
Yeah.
And that part of it just didn't age particularly well. Also because I don't think it would have seemed, some of that stuff wouldn't have seemed that funny to me when it came out. But you know, I still enjoyed, like I said, the fact that I now solve the mystery of this movie. And I still think there's a universe where Rainn Wilson became a big comedy star in the movies, but for whatever reason, that just didn't happen in our universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having recently, I actually recently rewatched Slither, like in the last year and a half, and I think that movie definitely holds up.
Okay, good.
I mean,
Stronger
just because
than this
it just feels, yeah, it feels like it just, I don't know. Like, I think it was, yeah. I think maybe this was like a down slope for him, because then he also like had that short in that movie night. Was it movie 43 or whatever it was?
Oh yeah.
He also did Scooby Doo. I don't know. Like, I think Dawn of the Dead and Slither were kind of in a different bucket of his, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's crazy to think of where his career went and is currently.
Yeah, seriously.
Beyond like, you know, the trouble he got in, and, you know, being fired and hired and you know, all that. Beyond that, just like the extremity that it went to, you know, from like the genre stuff and like gross out and gags and gore and all this stuff, and now, you know, he's in a lane where he like is running a comic book studio of
He's
film
doing
production.
a Superman movie next, you know.
Yeah,
I know. I'm saying though, but he's overseeing it all. Like, you know,
I know, but
like,
I'm just saying, like, that's the guy who's doing your
everything.
Superman. It's like that's like it's really interesting.
Well, he did his evil Superman. He wrote that movie Brightburn
got that
a few years back, which I actually like that one.
You know, I haven't seen that one,
but he didn't direct that one.
I think that like it's cool that he's got that side arm of like stuff he develops as a producer and as a writer, and
yeah,
I guess that will stop for a while with DC, or at least it will all be done under the DC umbrella. But no, I mean, it's interesting. It's like, this was like seeing you know, when a band puts out like the bonus disc with an album and it's the demos,
right,
or it's like an alternate mix that's like you hear it and you go, I can tell why they didn't release this, but I'm glad I get to hear it. That's kind of how I feel about this movie. It's like this feels like an important step in the development of him as a filmmaker, but it does seem a little strange. It did also feel very indie in the way that it was kind of cobbled together. Like sometimes the way the scenes were edited, it felt like they didn't have a lot of the actors on set together at the same time, or there were just little moments where it felt like, oh, they only had Liv Tyler for a few days, or they only had Kevin Bacon for a few days.
Right.
I found myself doing that watching the movie. I don't know if you ever do that, where you start figuring out how they did it,
how they shot it,
how they planned this, and how they put this together. And also, I will say that's the other fun part was just the roll call of James Gunn's little troupe of actors. Seeing Michael Rooker, seeing Sean Gunn, that kind of stuff was, I still enjoyed. But yeah, it just felt like, and honestly, after The Boys, after Kick-Ass, after all these other things, it just didn't feel like I think in 2010 it really would have felt like, oh yeah, they're starting to do these kind of superhero movies, but this almost felt like a much more of a reference to that like loner guy, incel type guy who might fancy himself this type of character more so than it was commenting on superheroes as a genre, but it does play around a little bit with that. And I thought the Nathan Fillion, the stuff with his show, which was like clearly a riff on the Willie Ames Bible Man. I think that's the name of the show.
For sure, yeah.
Show. That stuff was kind of fun to see. And James Gunn was actually pretty funny as the demon guy. He keeps whacking his tongue around.
That's so crazy, man. Yeah, it was nuts.
I think that just look at that image of him wagging his tongue around and think that's the guy who's directing the next Superman movie. That's pretty wild.
It is.
Ronald, did you have any favorite moments or like things, if you liked it before and like was there anything particular that you remembered enjoying that still held up?
It's I hate it just as much as I love it, but the like scene in the line where the guy is like being an asshole and he kind of runs to the car and gets the wrench and comes back. I hate that scene, but I kind of love it at the same time. It's like the reaction doesn't warrant what happened. I mean, sure,
right.
You could hit his knee or something. He cracked him in the middle of his head and then hit the woman. It's like, what?
When he hits the woman, I have to say I feel terrible, but I feel like because of what you're saying, that's when I thought, okay, this scene is crazy, and I started kind of laughing because it's like it was so over the top. Like the guy kind of seemed like he deserved it, but the woman really didn't seem like she did. And then the fact that also we had just seen him changing in the car with his ass sticking up in the window and his tidy whities. It just was a funny, awkward scene. And yeah, it was the first scene that really felt like they're really going in on this wrongheadedness of what he's doing,
100%. Yeah,
and also I think that was what was funny about the Elliot Page character was that what they were into was exactly the worst side of what he was doing.
It's wild, man. Cool.
So we saw Super, or I saw Super. Finally, I can check it off the list. I guess that's it for me. I think I've seen all the James Gunn things now. So
cool. I guess it's my pick, right?
Yeah, what's your pick for next time?
So I always use this as a means to watch movies that I haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. Batteries Not Included is one of my favorite movies.
Oh, wow.
Not that one, though. Oh. Matthew Robbins is one of the more interesting writers. He just did like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. He like helped write that. He has his hand in stuff. He's like 75 years old, still being active in this world.
That's cool.
And there's a movie that I haven't seen. 1981's Dragonslayer. I've never seen it in my life, and they just put out like an insanely like praised remaster of it. So nice. I want an excuse to go to Beyond Video, located in Baltimore, and I'm gonna rent that movie and I'm gonna put it in and I'm gonna watch that shit. I want you guys to watch it too.
We're gonna make us watch it. No, that was like an HBO staple when I was a kid, and there's moments in it that will never leave my mind for their kind of the sort of gore almost in that movie, or just at least stuff that's pretty heavy in that movie. No, I'm definitely.
Guess what? It's on fucking Pluto. Woo! It's on Pluto. What is Pluto is like a catch-all. It's crazy, man.
They have a lot of these library titles.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I mean, it has ads, but I mean, if you can deal with ads, it's also on Canopy for free as well.
Oh, cool.
We mentioned Canopy last week when we were talking about where Super was, but again, that's a service that you can get a free account through your local public library, and they have tons of movies on there. But yeah, I'm looking it up too. Dragonslayer. Also, it's on. It's streaming with on Hoopla. If you've ever used that, that's apparently it's free on that too.
Yeah.
So plenty of options where you can just rent it for a couple bucks at your favorite PVOD or SVOD platform. But yeah, okay, cool. Dragonslayer. I feel like I saw this as a kid. I can remember certain scenes, but I don't really remember much of the movie at all.
Oh, cool.
This will be a fun one.
What about you, John? Have you seen it?
Oh, I just said it was all over HBO when I was.
Oh, right.
But I mean, like,
you could have turned the channel when it came on.
Similar to Steve's take, though, I have certain images that really stick in my head, and the rest of it, the shape of the movie is not real strong. But no, there's at least one moment that I remember being like, unless I'm thinking of some other dragon movie, I think this has to be the one. There's like one moment that was just like, to me as a kid, just terrific.
Oh, cool.
With, those moments, but that probably aren't really that scary when you go back and watch them. But because of when you watched them, and it was like they introduced a concept to you that's horrifying.
For sure, man. That's exciting.
No, can't wait to see it.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to it. Is that Peter? Guys. What's his name? The actor? Is that dude in that? Peter
McNichol.
Is that Peter McNichol in that?
Yeah. Ghostbusters. I
know when I saw Ghostbusters 2 and he popped up, I thought he was a new face. But I guess when I was a kid, it didn't register with me who he was, but from Dragonslayer. But yeah, that's one of the that happens sometimes where you realize you already liked somebody and you didn't know it. All right. So, Ronald, we just talked about James Gunn's first superhero movie.
Absolutely.
Maybe he did a Toxic Avenger movie. Maybe that technically is a superhero movie. But one of his first superhero movies we just talked about, but we also just saw, you and I did, Steve didn't, we also just saw his most recent superhero movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the capper to the trilogy, that I think this show is generally, like, of the shared opinion that those movies stand out amongst all the Marvel ones as a little bit different. They kind of look a little better. They feel a little better. There's something sort of heartfelt. The actors even seem to be I mean, not that there aren't other Marvel movies that do the same thing as far as quality level, but these feel special. And this movie was definitely a James Gunn. I mean, this definitely was written and directed by James Gunn through and through, and the cast shows up knowing what they're doing and, stepping into these characters. And caps off this trilogy, which is, like, I guess kind of hard to do within the never-ending franchise of Marvel to, like, stand out as a trilogy. But these movies really do stand together as a story, a statement kind of.
Cool.
What'd you think?
So I want to lead with this. I mean, and this should maybe give you an idea of how I feel about it. There are two movies that I would absolutely show my daughter, like, off top when she's able to process them. It is Guardians of the Galaxy Volumes 1 and 2. I will not show my daughter Volume 3. And it's not because of the quality of the movie. It's because of the subject matter. It's because of, when I used to hear things like parental guidance is suggested, this needs some parental guidance. This is one of those movies that's a little heavier out of the trilogy, and tonally it is doing a juggling act of a lot of things. He succeeds, but this isn't the Guardians that you're used to. I can tell you that it still has the love and the passion, but tonally, this ain't what maybe people are coming in feeling like, oh man, this is gonna be, it's gonna be so funny and fun. There's some of that, but there's a lot.
There were people.
Tell me 3 people who felt that way.
It's gonna be so funny. It's gonna be so cool. Let's go. But like the I can't wait excitement is
I
mean? Like,
that gets at something you were saying. You were a little bit like, not that you were not convinced, but nothing in the marketing had, like, set your heart aflame. And we were talking about this before the movie, Ronald, about how, like, they didn't really sell this movie. I mean, I don't mean they didn't sell me on it. I thought the trailers were good. Some things in the clips and trailers they released really got me fired up. So I was not where you were. I wasn't lukewarm going in, but not that you were lukewarm, but you were going to see it for reasons other than anything the trailers had shown you, is kind of what you were saying to me. And I was saying that, like, it's funny to me that they really didn't sell this movie, and you're watching the movie and instantly you can kind of see why. It's because it's actually a pretty twisty, fun plot for one of these Marvel movies. It does hold together. It's not one of those that falls apart and has, like, sequences that feel overly familiar. I mean, it really was I thought it was a really solid entry in this kind of movie, but it definitely has even from the first scene, it's a more somber way to start a movie. And even the opening song is like, you keep thinking maybe it's going to kick in and you're going to get this like big moment, but instead it's a very, and I really love, the more I think about the way it begins and the character it starts with and the way we see them acting, I think it's a really cool thing that is totally James Gunn and totally these movies. But yes, it's as though they said, what if the third movie, how do you keep the third movie in a trilogy from sucking? Well, why don't you just pile on the heaviness kind of,
Yeah.
And I think this one does that. Like, it somehow avoids feeling like it's getting sillier, and feels like it's getting heavier, which I think sometimes trilogies don't go that way. The last movie is like the wildest, biggest adventure,
Yeah, it's none of that.
But this is much, but it taken as a whole, it is that it has all the scenes and all the sights and all the visuals and stuff and the, the colors. And I mean, it has all the marks of one of these movies, but what it's heading towards is a moment that's going to make you feel, I don't know, a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
About your life even.
Yeah. I don't know if that's fun. I don't know if that's fun for me. I don't know if like coming into a movie and like having some labor of emotions, like for most of the movie was fun for me. I don't know if that felt good. I don't know if it like, but it's a good movie. This is the crazy part. This is a great movie, but this is a labor. It's like there are things happening in this movie that are going to be very hard to process. And I wouldn't show a kid this stuff. And I wouldn't even take a kid to see it necessarily. It's that weird. Like nobody came out like happy. You get what I'm saying? Like nobody came out like, oh, fucking crazy movie was that, like the way that people did when I saw Guardians. I
like
just
when they went in.
I just remember how Guardians was. Do you?
Hey, see again? Wow.
I walked past the line with people waiting to see the movie. I'm telling you what it was. Yeah. I came in, and then I got in before everybody because press, and then as I left out, it was a little somber, and not just because
it's a quiet murmur. People weren't like laughing or clapping.
I want to comment on something. So it's interesting hearing this because I feel like it's like a weird thing, and you're not the first that have said it. Like I've definitely have read this. So like you're not like, I don't know, downing me at all, but like it's weird to hear this kind of feedback because especially with the Marvel of it all. I feel like a lot of the criticism of the Marvel stuff more recently is that it's like that there are no emotions in these shows or these TV movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or these movies.
No.
Like there's no relationship to the characters, like that they're kind of void of a lot of things, and or they're just like silly, funny, and like a bad movie. Like specifically, like you think about like Thor, Love and Thunder got a lot of that rap.
100%.
And or even Eternals, or these are not like apples to apples because like well, at least the Eternals is not, because that was like the first, but like the Thor would be more of a good representation because it's like the fourth in that series. So it's like
right,
it's not like a criticism of what you're saying at all because I haven't even seen it, but it's just interesting to me to hear that kind of response when you think about like kind of, to me at least, where it seems like this series like is building to or is crescendoing to, especially when like rewatching Volume 2 recently. Like that's in some ways a pretty sad movie too.
Yeah, it is.
And I feel like what you're describing and like rewatching Part 1 recently, like because Sydney loves the first one, like it just feels like that's the steps that this trilogy was building to in some ways.
100%.
And it seems like the reception to maybe how heavy or sad or emotional, whatever the proper description is, that this one is, it almost seems like in some ways I hear that I'm like, okay, so he nailed it, or like he landed it. Like it's right where he wanted it to be.
I think he did, Steve.
Okay.
I fucking love this movie.
Okay.
It's so hard to talk about it without talking about what happens in it, though, because I'm sure you have like 3 big questions in your head that like I wouldn't want to chip away at anything. I didn't read a single review. I didn't know anything that wasn't in the marketing, but I think he more than stuck the landing. I just think this movie does deliver that. When I read the one thing I did read was the Rotten Tomatoes page. I will sometimes go through and just read the little pull quotes because those aren't usually very revealing. And one thread that I saw that I totally agree with is this movie is gross. It's got lots of grotesque images in it. It's not quite gory, but it is gross enough that you would almost say it was gory. And it's got a couple of moments of gore, but it's not a gory movie. It's just lots of goop and lots of stuff getting sliced and lots of flesh grafted onto metal and lots of like close-ups of like when the animals that have, I mean, animal cruelty is going to give some people that's what Ronald's talking about. This movie does not flinch from animal cruelty, and it's just all over the movie. But it's like it gives the movie such teeth when it comes to like, I mean, honestly, I think this villain, remember when we were talking about ego as like a good villain, like a philosophically interesting villain to ponder with implications. The high evolutionary in this is a really interesting, really scary villain. And it's almost like you don't notice it in the movie because what he's doing is so specific, and what he's after, he's like a scientist, he's like a researcher, he's like an experimenter. You don't notice him as much as you notice someone like Kang, who kind of shows up and is just, I am the evil, I'm giving an evil speech. This guy has like interactions and things where he seems like he's trying to even be reasonable to the people that he's going to fight. And it makes him so interesting when he goes like totally unhinged, because you see all along that he's terrible. But you can also see, it's almost like the Empire. It's almost like in Star Wars when they give you that inside glimpse of the Empire and you realize there are like middle manager bureaucrat types who are trying to do what some Sith Lord is trying to set in motion. And there are people looking around going like, is this really what we're going to do? I don't know. It's got such depth to it. And I think that like everything that you would expect from a James Gunn movie, it definitely delivers in that level. I think the thing that's like hard to talk about without tipping any hand is like the way he ends it, the way he chooses to end it. I think it's so funny how many people out there have passionate feelings. People that love James Gunn and hate James Gunn, I've witnessed it, have all these like everyone seems to know what this movie is, and no one who hasn't seen it has guessed what it is, in my opinion. Like it's not
on any level.
It's not readily apparent how the ending is going. You feel like it's going to break your heart, but you don't really know how it's going to do it. And then you see it and you go, oh, okay. They did it in a way that was not necessarily what you're expecting, And it is true to those characters, Steve. Like, I don't know if you've read James Gunn saying this movie's long because he had to pay off all the arcs. Yeah. The more I thought about it, is like, damn it, he really did give like the whole, including Kraglin, including Cosmo the dog, the sort of new members of the team. Everybody really gets an arc, and an arc that pays off like stuff set in motion in the first movie. Like our idea of Drax as the destroyer and a guy who lost his family and a guy who's like, this is a good day to die, that kind of guy. This movie gives you a different idea of what his destiny might be. Same with every single character. It gets something fresh thrown onto their character and makes you go, oh wow, James Gunn really did, I think, have an idea about where this was going, and he stuck to it, to some extent.
I think that this may be one of the first villains that I've ever seen in the Marvel universe where the lore of a character is shown on the screen, not like hypothetical. This is something that I've always complained about. When somebody's like, this person's very dangerous, he's slaughtered so many people. Nah, like this guy, you see what makes him as evil as he is, his ideas, he shares them, they show them. And I think that this almost feels like the Nicholas Winding Refn sort of deal, but the best version of that. When somebody's like, I'm going to subvert what you think about who I am and how I make things. And he almost intensified some of the ideas in the first and the second. My chief complaint is I kind of wish that some of those ideas were spread a little more between the three movies, so that when we got the third movie, when they show some of the characters' backstories, one in particular, that it doesn't feel so like, oh my God. I kind of wish there were pieces of it before, like just glimpses, just give me a little bit instead of what they did in this one, because it feels so fucking heavy. But if there were to be anybody that can juggle these things, James Gunn has done it. I was telling, this is what I said to John after we got out of it. I love this movie. I will never watch this movie again.
I don't know if I'm going to want to watch it again.
I don't know if I'm ever going to watch it again.
Wow.
I'm serious. Like, I've watched volume 1 and 2 so many. I don't know if this is one I'm going to readily watch again, just because of it, it's like he sourced all the ideas that people say, like, this could be and he did the adult version of that for the ending. And he did what an adult would feel like would be like the culmination of heartbreak. You know what I mean?
Well, I actually took Nikki and Henry to see it this afternoon after school.
Okay.
So I was just going to add this in that, like, what's interesting is, Henry saw the first one when he was little. In fact, we have this great picture. The Towson Cinemark Theater had just opened, and we convinced Henry to wear his tux to the theater. When I forget how old would he have been? 2014. He would have been 6. And so that's a real special memory for us going to that theater. And so going to see it with him again today, I thought, oh, wow, they did this thing. And it's kind of like what the Harry Potter movies did, where it's like this movie's grown up. Like, Henry's 15 now.
Wow.
He loved the first one when he was 6. He's 15 now. He loved this movie today. And he hasn't had that feeling about a Marvel thing. Like, I've been much more like hot on or enjoy, like, I've been mixed positive for pretty much all the Marvel stuff, but I also have been willing to say that, like, I totally come out of a movie like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness or Quantumania feeling how audiences aren't necessarily going to gravitate towards it. This movie, I sort of feel like if audiences give it a chance, it will grab them. But I will say that Henry hasn't said that was great walking out of any movie, except for maybe, John Wick, you thought was great.
That was so fun.
But I'm, just to my point, like, I think that it's like, there is the chance that this is that. I think that whole hype about best Marvel movie since Endgame, a lot of people have been saying that. I think that there's a reason. I don't know if that's oh yes, definitely. But I definitely think there's a case you can make and I can understand why people would say that. This feels like a movie. This is a movie. It's got that look and that feel, that gravity, that whatever it is, that just feels different. It doesn't. And Ronald, isn't it like refreshingly unconnected to? Yeah, it doesn't set anything up, Steve. It doesn't have like a cameo that's like out of left field. There's nobody that doesn't belong in this story. Anything it calls back is within the Guardians franchise. It makes it really feel like you could watch these 3 movies, never do another one of the Marvel movies, and be just fine. The only thing you wouldn't get is some of the jokes that they make. Like in this movie, they do have a reference or two to like what's happened since. But I think that's another reason why these movies feel special, is that you could not be into the whole Marvel thing and still want to go see this. In fact, I know several people that have said, "Oh, I got to go see that. I've been kind of checked out on Marvel, but I'm going to see the new Guardians movie." So
yeah, for sure,
for sure,
it's good. It's a great movie, man. Like, don't think because of what I'm saying that it's so
not... I have to do these things. So rank the Guardians movies.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 for me. one being the best.
I got you.
Yeah. The order in which they came out.
Oh man, 2's got so much great stuff in it.
2 does,
but I don't know that 2.
Just the number, John.
No, I'm saying 2 and 3 are bustling. Like they're like this for me. So it's like I can't. It's hard to say. It's like 1 and then 2 and 3 are tied.
Okay. I feel like I wanted to ask you one other thing.
Please ask questions.
Well, yeah, there was something. Well, you kind of answered it already with, when you were saying it feels like kind of its own thing, like it's not setting up something. And like the more I kind of like think about the Guardians movies in general, I feel like they all kind of benefit from that. Obviously, the first one the most, but even when like Volume 2 came out, like they were in like full effect, like these movies crossing over. But it felt more like the Guardians were able to become parts of other things, like they had their moments in Thor or Endgame. They made their appearances, whether it was in credits or like little snippets here and there in other movies. Like it didn't seem like their movies were like the pivotal things, except for maybe the presence of a stone or something like that. So
do you remember how exciting it was in Infinity War when they showed up? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You remember like that feeling of like we're getting to see the Guardians again. Like my friends are back.
For sure.
My weird group of friends are here. So yeah, it definitely felt like they were the sort of like outlaw stars that got to break the rules, and they've also, I think, given James Gunn maybe the freest hand, right? Like
it seems like it. Yeah, I mean,
directors.
There really hasn't been much that he's like in those 3 films. Well, I have not seen the last one, but from what you said, not have to do that legwork of like tying certain things together. No, that's good to hear, because I was kind of curious about that, but. Yeah, I can't wait to see this. I mean, I have no doubt that, my expectations are pretty high, but.
Well, I'll say this, Steve, about the tonal shift.
I'm excited.
You mentioned that. I do think that the second time through, it was a much smoother viewing experience because I sometimes knowing what's coming, you can see how they're setting things up and how a scene's leading into another scene. But I feel like the second time through, I enjoyed all the music cues better. I enjoyed all the sort of like flashbacks and back to the story and all the little break points where the tonal shifting could throw you off. I was much more into it when I was anticipating what they were doing and going, oh, okay, I see how this works. I see what they're doing there. And the other thing is, Ronald, tell me if I'm crazy, but like, do they seem to work harder on the effects in these movies than the other Marvel movies?
That's another thing. Okay, so Steve, if there were to be like a real disconnect with quality versus quantity that in the last couple of years, you wouldn't know it by watching this movie. This thing looks gorgeous.
That's
like,
what,
top to bottom.
It looks,
the close special effects, the far away stuff, the like rocket looks like
you just forget that he's not a real raccoon.
It's like we're going from PS2 to PS5, from the second one to the third one. It's unreal. I don't know which changed with the special effects like between these two, but Rocket looks insane. It's like you can see every whisker, every little piece of moisture in his eye.
I was about to say the little kind of dark, wet skin around his eyes.
Yeah.
Like what? And especially when you see the sort of animals in some of the scenes, like it's like the detail is almost horrific in some cases, but yeah, it's amazing what they've pulled off in that sense, or at least compared to the. I mean, it's as someone who really enjoyed Quantumania, that movie looks so like cartoony and like colorful in a much more like a much less convincing way than this movie did.
Yeah, and this is the last thing I'll say. Like I feel like after James Gunn, there will be none. There will be nothing else. Like it doesn't feel like I feel like I'm losing someone.
Yeah.
Like now that he's gone.
Yeah.
What? Like, what are we looking forward to now? Like
someone who's broken up with us has taken us out for one. But I know I'm leaving you, but let's go out for the best date I can give you right now. No, I thought the same thing, that we're kind of losing that from the Marvel thing, and like anybody else picking up one of these characters, that whatever happens at the end of this movie, I'm interested because I like the characters, but I'll instantly feel like, oh yeah, that like that season of Veep when Iannucci left, and you could feel like the writers were not quite nailing the tone, like little things like that you just feel it in the back of your mind. That season of Community when Dan Harmon was gone, where you're like, yeah, they're not getting it. I feel like other writers don't quite know how to write these characters, and I guess that's one thing I'll say, Steve, too. I love Star-Lord. I think Chris Pratt is great as Star-Lord. I think when James Gunn writes him, he's a character I love, like a genuine heroic character that I love. He has some great moments in this that make you remember why you thought Chris Pratt was going to be a star. Like that. There's just something about this role as written by James Gunn with that actor that really works for me, that I sort of feel like other times he's popped up in other Marvel movies and it wasn't James Gunn writing, you don't quite get the same Star-Lord. You don't get the real the real version of the character.
Acting his ass off in this movie, man.
He seems to know it's the last one, or at least, who knows, but
yeah. Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, go
ahead.
I think people know.
Good.
People know if they want to see this one, but
sure, in the bag or not. Yeah, I can't wait to see like the outcome of this one in terms of its performance. We'll see.
Me too, man. I'm genuinely curious.
This will be the one that I feel like if it really does underperform, there's a big problem.
Right. Because people genuinely like these movies, right?
They love these characters, these movies. Yeah,
for sure.
This is a true do or die moment, I think, for Marvel. But we'll see. All right. Well, what else? I mentioned. I don't know.
You
if
tell
I
us, Steve. You said you've watched.
Yeah, when we were recording out, I just feel like I felt like, damn, I can't go see Guardians, so I got to see a bunch of other stuff that we either missed or didn't talk about or whatever. But thankfully this week there was a bunch of films that released digitally. One of them I remember I actually called on a past episode, called the date of when it would come out on VOD, and that was Universal Pictures' Renfield came out.
You did, man.
This week. Yeah, like their 17-day thing is so
you called the crap out of it.
But yeah, that came out digitally, as well as The Pope's Exorcist, starring Russell Crowe. And I'm really happy that Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves came out digitally as well. I mentioned that on the podcast before, but I definitely want to mention it again if you didn't get to see that in theaters, or we're waiting for it to come on a digital option at home. That is available now, and among the 3 movies I just mentioned, that would be the one I'd say is the biggest ahead for me. But I watched The Pope's Exorcist and I watched Renfield, and I thought they both were pretty good.
Okay.
I think Renfield definitely, it has that kind of comedy. It's kind of silly, very silly, I'll say. But I really liked Nicholas Hoult. I think he's a really great actor. I like him in most things that he's in.
Yeah, he's
and I can't
always a high point.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that like some of the action sequences in this like feel like some kind of dry run if he is indeed in the running for like a Bond possible casting, which his name has always come up around because he's really good in the action sequences. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of like a fun horror comedy. The Pope's Exorcist is the one that probably surprised me more because I, admittedly, like, didn't even like register for me except for the fact that Russell Crowe was in it, who I really like Russell Crowe. And watching this movie is a reminder like that Russell Crowe just has it. Even when he's in this, like, Lionsgate, probably, I think that I remember reading the budget was like super low on this, probably his fee majority wise. But it's like one of those moments watching this where I'm like, God damn, Russell Crowe is so good. And like, whatever you think about him as a person, the shit he's been in, he's probably an asshole, whatever his history is. Like, he has that like star magnet when he's on the screen. I feel like, especially in this movie, like he's really fun and good in this movie. And
wow.
I say fun because his character is kind of, kind of an asshole in some ways, like around the church of it all. And like, he is the Pope's exorcist of the title.
Oh, wow.
But he's just so
Pope's
good.
Exorcist.
He's just so good, man. Like, and especially recently thinking about all the Gladiator 2 talk, and like that cast is amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Barry Keoghan and Paul Mescal and Denzel and Pedro Pascal was announced this week. Like, an amazing cast.
Yeah.
Connie Nielsen's going to be in it again. Like, it's just an awesome cast.
Is Ridley Scott directing it?
Yes.
Wow.
And it's just like, what that's what the fuck, right?
That
and
guy's
like,
amazing.
Man.
How old is he? Like 85 or something?
Yeah, man. He's in his 80s.
I mean, I don't know. That's one of those losses that we're not even really thinking about, but he really is like a little chunk of film history right there. That guy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's insane, man. Like, he just finished Napoleon, like that's a huge production coming out. But yeah, I don't know. But all to say, like, watching this kind of smaller horror movie that in some cases would have gone direct to video, direct to video streaming, but did actually pretty well in theaters and definitely made money for Lionsgate. And if you like exorcism movies or, that kind of, which I don't normally gravitate towards them, honestly, it was Russell Crowe that got me to watch this movie. It was better than I thought it was going to be honest with you. It was very entertaining. He's great in it. And a lot of the like possession demon stuff is like, is pretty well handled, like with the knowing the budget for the movie in terms of like the effects and like what they do with makeup and things like that. I thought was really cool. But they're both kind of like 3.5 star movies for me out of 5. Renfield, that is, and The Pope's Exorcist, but they're all on VOD.
Okay.
If you want to check it out, you take your pick in terms of renting or buying them. I also watched a movie called SweetHurt, which is on video on demand. It's like an indie comedy put out by Gravitas Ventures. It's kind of like it's an Australian movie that is about like these groups of friends that kind of find their way to each other in this. One group's going to this area to take care of some affairs for a family member that's passed away, and the other one's already kind of living in this area, and they kind of cross paths over this this night or two of just, I don't know, crazy stuff that happens to these two groups. But it's just like, it hit me, or it came on my radar because one of my favorite bands had posted about it because they had some music in it.
Oh, wow.
The band Mess out of Chicago. And it is how I heard of it. And then I had seen that it was on demand, so checked it out, and it was fine. I mean, I kind of like, thinking about these indie movies and like, knowing what they had to, make this movie. I feel like the thing that I always look for more than any kind of like production look is like, is it just funny? Is it well written? Like what doesn't cost the money, I guess, from somebody who's like writing, directing, or co-writing and directing a movie. And usually, like, that's kind of where you find that quality in this level of film is just like really good writing and really good characters.
Yeah.
And I don't really think it was there in this movie, but it's enough there that, I would say I would support it and say check it out if you want like that kind of I don't want to say American Pie ish, but it's just, kind of like that R comedy, very like kind of heightened sexually and um yeah, I don't know. It has a cool sound, lots of like uh early 2000s like alt rock bands, pop punk bands, that's kind of what drew me in. But I'm also kind of a sucker for those like kind of coming of age comedies and things of that nature. But that's called SweetHurt. And the
Okay.
last one I want to mention, which is the standout, which is the must-see recommendation that I have, is that finally this movie came on demand this week. It's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And this is a movie that a few people that I follow have been raving about since, I guess, the middle of last year. And it finally got a digital release this week. This is a movie that Neon put out. I think they had a little run of it at the end of 2022,
Okay.
theatrically, maybe. But more, I've seen more about it, like in terms of like the government issuing like warnings around the movie. That's kind of
Yeah.
how the publicity has been going for the movie.
Wow.
Yeah. I've seen
Just in
that too.
terms of like, it's basically just these, environmental activists that decide that the way to make a statement is to basically blow up a pipeline in Texas, an oil refinery, and to disrupt the
Whoa.
system, to disrupt the way of delivering oil, and to drive the prices up and make it not a viable option for fossil fuels and things like that. But this is a movie that fucking blew me away. Like, I had heard it was good. I'd heard it was great. This is a thriller. This is a movie that just starts and doesn't stop. It's an hour and 35 or hour and 45.
It looked really good.
Yeah, like a lot of the cast you won't recognize, or I didn't at least. There are a couple in the movie that kind of have had some more movies recently. Specifically, Lucas Gage is in it, who was in Euphoria. He was in White Lotus, Assassination Nation. And then Sasha Lane is also in it, who was in American Honey, which most people may know her from, but also Jake Weary, who Ronald, you probably remember him from Animal Kingdom, the TV series.
Okay. Oh wow.
He was I guess the youngest brother, the blonde haired one, but the rest of them are kind of, they look recognizable, but I couldn't really place them. But I don't know, like the movie's told so strategically. The editing is amazing. It's directed so well. The characters are great. And again, I say like this is a thriller. Like this is like the music is just so propulsive. The score is great. I don't know. There's just like nobody really knows about this movie. But this is one of the better movies I've seen recently, just in terms of, again, I keep mentioning it about other movies on this podcast, this episode specifically, like just the writing and the characters and just like how much you can do with not a lot. And I mean, this movie is literally just about these people coming together in Texas and how they're gonna build these bombs. And like, and I'm not condoning this, I'm not saying this is anything I would do, but this is a movie. And this is in some ways a call to action, at least these filmmakers in some way. But it's wild. And I can't recommend it enough. I mean, this is one of the better movies I've seen this year. And it's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And I would try to find it if it sounds at all interesting to you. The guy that made
it's been on my radar, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the guy that made it, I heard him on a podcast recently. He was on one of the Ringer Big Picture podcasts, and he was talking about he's directing I don't know if you've heard about the Faces of Death remake that they're doing. He's doing that now, but he had done some stuff prior to this. He did that movie Cam a few years back.
Yeah,
I don't know, Ron. I think we talked about that, Ronald. Do you remember that one?
What's the plot of it?
It's like it's about like cam girls. Like where
yes.
I can't remember the full plot, but like
I remember
we definitely talked about it. It was like
yeah.
I think it was like a Netflix movie, I want to say.
Yes.
But I don't know what he's got going on otherwise, but this is definitely like a different level of movie from the ones of his that I've seen before. and it's kind of like told in like chapters where you kind of break away from the narrative that we're in to learn about the 6 or 7 people that are a part of this group that are doing it, and kind of like what their call to action was and why they're involved at all in this effort. But I don't know, man. I'm super high on this movie, so I really want to recommend it. And anybody that's out there, you know, like John, I'm glad you'd heard of it, because I definitely hope you can check it out.
Yeah, man, it's
yeah,
now on my radar. I gotta check it out.
That's if you check it out, let me know what you think. I'm curious. But yeah, that's a lot of what I've watched the past few days. So I think that's all I've got. What about you guys? Anything else you want to mention?
You know, I feel like that's enough for this week. I will just say that Barry has been amazing this season, and crazy and dark and weird, but we'll talk about that hopefully when the season's up. We can maybe talk about how that show ends up, but there's really nothing else like that show on television or ever. I don't think there's something about it that makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah, same. I guess I'll talk about my stuff next week. Yeah.
Sure. I want to mention one more, because I did see a movie when I was on vacation. I saw Sisu.
Okay. Yeah,
you saw Sisu
on my short list.
Yeah, it came out last week.
How was it?
I saw it in Dolby in Destin. It's so good, guys.
It looks so good.
The trailer is incredible. I mean, if you like the trailer, like, that is the movie. The movie is the trailer. You know,
you'd hope. I mean, you know,
it's quick. It's pretty brutal, and this is the kind of thing I told my coworkers who I talk with movies a lot about. Like, I left that movie thinking, the filmmaker, the director of the movie, I'm like, this is the kind of filmmaker I see DC or Marvel going after to make a comic book movie.
Wow.
Like, just in the way the action was shot, and like how, like, I want to say the word, like, how like tough the movie felt. I don't know. I don't know. It's like a bad adjective, but like,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like there's so much fighting and aggression in the movie, but like the movie feels not like John Wick tough, but like, even though the comparison to John Wick is there, I guess. Yeah. But
I've heard it
confident. I don't know. Just what are you saying?
The one thing that John Wick lacks is dirt. And like the raid, it feels dirty. Yeah. Like, you know, you watch it, you're like, man, this hurts. There's like people getting hurt, and
I mean, there's blood and mud. That might be what it is. Like, there's so much.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Like this guy, the guy, like, you know, Sisu, like that the title is referring to, is just like, he gets his ass kicked too. Like he fucking goes through it. But like, his whole lore is that like he survives. Is his like legend. Is like that he was this, you know, soldier who went rogue, and they used him to do these rogue things, and he's been off the map, and now he's crossed paths with these Nazis who are like trying to steal his gold, and he's not having it. And it's just like, that's the plot.
That's so good.
But yeah, I thought it was really good, really entertaining. And again, I was able to see it in Dolby, which just made it even better. I was shocked that it was playing in Dolby. But yeah, it was really good too. So I'd recommend that one as well.
Cool.
No, I'm glad to hear that it holds up, because the trailer really did make you go, okay, I'm sold. You know, like,
yeah, the trailer's awesome.
If it's as fun as that and as good as that, and everything you're saying about the kind of tough vibe or the extra edge, I mean, you get that from the trailer. I can totally imagine that kind of grit, that texture, whatever.
Cool.
All right, cool.
Well, cool. So next week we've got not batteries, not
Dragonslayer.
Dragonslayer. Right.
Dragonslayer on Pluto. Can it be? For sure. And then I forget what the other one I said was, but
Dragon's not included.
Dragon's not included.
Dragon's not included. and I want to say, like, this is by no means like you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but I made a request to get a piece of hardware that I want to talk about so bad that I cannot afford, that I'm hoping that they'll let me borrow, that I'm going to do like a comprehensive video on if we get access to it. I want you guys on film reacting to it. I'm trying my damnedest to get access to this hardware, and hopefully we can talk about it.
There you go. There's a little teaser for the gearheads out there.
Yeah, man.
Ronald's going hard on a piece of hardware that he's trying to make it happen.
Hell yeah, man.
Cool. Moviesmovie.com is the website. YouTube.com/moviesmovie podcast. If you want to watch the video element, but subscribe to the podcast, please. If you do already subscribe, please leave a rating, hit the share button, put a star, whatever you can do.
Whatever you can do
to help spread the love, the
least
movie
or the most
love.
that you can do.
Yes.
Somebody I want to see what the most they can do. I really want. If you're a fan out there and you feel like you can do the most for us, I want to know what that means. I want to see like
show us your mostest.
Like skywriting or something. There's got to be something really amazing.
Somebody out there can make it happen, I'm sure.
But the least you can do is just click on us.
Yeah,
give us a review on it.
Just do that clicking.
Okay. All right, guys. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.